Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Woolfolk again. Woolfolk the other way at the 30, the 40. Woolfolk to midfield. Miles Woolfolk with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsome with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the Canes for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the far side. Oh, now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They are throwing the play for the left hand. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Nard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And on tonight's edition of the podcast, that's right, 4 more commitments for Carolina on the 2027 recruiting trail. All of those came within a span of 24 hours. So this coaching staff, they are absolutely cooking right now on the recruiting trail. This is, big news for Carolina in a class that for a while, it looked like Carolina was not necessarily going to bring in a bunch of difference makers. It was going to be a lot of guys that were lower rated. It was going to be guys that would really just fill out the depth of the roster. Well, now they've gone out and gotten some legitimate headliners, some guys that I think a lot of fans are going to be pretty satisfied with, a couple of guys that I think are pretty underrated here. And so we are going to break those guys down for you tonight. We'll go in chronological order of how they happened and tell you about each guy, give you a little breakdown on each one of them. And then, of course, you can go over to the website, check out a little bit more of those guys at HeelToughBlog.com. But as I said, we're going to go in chronological order. So let's start with the guy that committed first on Sunday afternoon. That would be 2027 3-star defensive lineman Caden Robinson Vickers. And yes, he is a 3-star defensive lineman because conveniently, Rivals dropped him to a 3-star right as he committed to Carolina. I checked this before he ended up committing. I checked this during the before the weekend because he was one of the guys that was officially visiting, and I made sure that he was a 4-star. And at the time, he was listed as a 4-star prospect. Go back after the commitment, and somehow he is now a 3-star. So Rivals, we're on to you. We're figuring some things out about how some of these rankings are going with certain guys. This, when I look at him, I think this is a guy that is huge for Carolina to get along the defensive front. Inside Carolina, their measurements a little bit different than what they officially have him set up as in terms of measurements on Rivals. The Rivals has him 6'1", 255 pounds, which, in that case, a little shorter, stouter type of player. Maybe he does end up slotting in at one of the defensive tackle spots. Meanwhile, if you go off of what Inside Carolina put up about him, they have him at 6'3", 265 pounds. A little bit of a different build. Guy that's much more similar, and I think would be used much more similarly to the guy that you are bringing in from Richmond this year in Donovan Hoylett. We talked a little bit about him with Andrew Jones. He said he's a guy that Carolina is probably going to play on the inside as well as the outside. He is going to be a guy that primarily is an edge rusher, but they are able to use him a little bit on the interior. There'll be certain packages where he'll be on the field on the inside, and that will allow maybe a guy like Jalen Harvey to be able to rush off the edge for Carolina at the same time, opposite of Milcard Abujide, while Hoylett is still on the field. So that would be very, very interesting. And I think that's kind of the type of player that you're looking at here with Robinson Vickers. Incredibly productive player for his junior season. He finished with 55 total tackles, 19 and a half tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, a remarkable 5 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery. If you're wondering, hey, maybe this is just a one-year thing for him, the year prior as a sophomore, he collected 60 total tackles for along with 10 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and 1 forced fumble for Dunillion High School in Dunillion, Florida. He is transferring for his senior season, and so he is going to be a guy that's going to go to Hawthorne High School in Hawthorne, Florida. So that will be interesting to see the transition there. I'm interested to see what type of production he puts up as a senior. If it's similar, if it's even better, that would be huge for Carolina. But this is a guy that is a multi-year producer. And when you go back to some of the other guys in this class, it's really 1 year of production. So yes, I mean, there are guys that you like based off of some of that production, but it's just one season. So you really want to see what the second year of production looks like for them to get a feel for what exactly they're going to bring when they get to Chapel Hill. Robinson Vickers, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. I really like this pickup for Carolina. I think he's, a guy that fits really well with what Carolina was needing along the defensive line. And, the thing that I wrote about him when I looked at his film, I said with his size, he's a guy that will likely slot into one of those edge rusher spots for Carolina. And that's a spot that Carolina is in need of bodies in this class. I mentioned Hoylett. That's a guy that's going to be gone at the end of the season due to graduation. Same would be assumed of Milcard Abujide, considering that he is a guy that could go to the NFL after this season. He's someone that Phil Steele listed as a 4th-team All-American in his preseason magazine, 1st-team All-ACC. If that ends up happening, even though he wouldn't be out of eligibility, I would imagine that Milcard Abujide is probably gone. And so I think that this was a very crucial pickup for Carolina to get someone that sort of fits that bigger edge rusher type of style. And that's exactly what you get here. When it comes to his game, there are plenty of reasons that he is living in the opposing backfield. He's done it the past 2 seasons, as I mentioned, but he's been back there very, very often. And a lot of that is, it starts with a nice release off the line of scrimmage. That's something that you always want to see from guys, is that you get that quick release off the line of scrimmage. It puts you in such an advantageous spot against offensive linemen, especially the slower offensive linemen. There are going to be guys that are going to be quicker than him, but I do think that for the most part, he matches up really well with a lot of those guys with that nice quick release off the line of scrimmage. He does a great job of consistently shedding blocks with technical moves. He uses more technical moves than he does physicality. But the thing that I will say is that I like the combination of the physicality with the technical moves that he has. I think I wrote down promising level of physicality. That's something that you would love to see him sort of step up just a little bit when he gets to the college level. I think he's more than capable of doing it. And when he does show it on film, it's very, very effective. So I think that's certainly something that they're going to be working on. But hey, man, if the technical moves work for you, if you're able to shed blocks and get into the backfield, it doesn't matter how you do it. It's just that you do it. And I think that's what you see from Caden Robinson Vickers. He's also a guy that, when I look at him, I think, he's probably one of the more complete linemen that the Tar Heels were recruiting in this class along the defensive front. I think he's somebody that Is able to rush the passer. I think he's a really good run defender as well. Being someone that plays on the inside, probably going to be a little bit more patient in the run game, not going to necessarily be focused on getting downhill nearly as much because he's not a pure pass rusher. So I love this pickup for Carolina. I think he should be a 4-star prospect based off of what I saw. I can't believe that he dropped to a 3-star prospect right after he commits to Carolina. It's just, one of those things that if the politics and the ins and outs of the rating, the rankings and how it works at the college level, it's not the most shocking thing that it ends up happening. But now, being a guy that's rated as the number 402 overall prospect, the number 43 defensive lineman in the class, I think he's a really solid player. Is he going to come in and contribute year one? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that he's immediately going to be a guy that is out there playing first team reps, but I do think there's an opportunity for him, especially with how he's built, which I think is perfect if they're going to keep him at that edge rusher spot, that spot that we've seen both Milcart and we'll see Donovan Hoylett play this season. And then he could be a guy that flashes inside at certain times. If they want to put a little bit more weight on him, could be a guy that plays there a little bit more religiously, but that would take a little bit more time. So I think he's capable of being someone that has some sort of role in his first year, but you got to get him in here and just see what his makeup ultimately is about. So with that commitment, Carolina jumped to 12 commitments in the class. Their 13th commitment came shortly after that when they picked up a commitment from 2027 4-star edge rusher Braden Booth. This one was stunning. When I jumped on here and did the podcast leading into the weekend, me and a lot of people in the recruiting community thought there is absolutely no way that he is not going to at least exit this weekend and be considering Baylor. And that ends up being the way that it goes. He gets to Sunday after the visit to Chapel Hill. He sees exactly what he needs. Carolina appears to just knock it completely out of the park, and they come away with his commitment. Baylor was the longstanding favorite here, but credit to Carolina's staff. They showed him whatever they needed to show him to be able to get him here. And this is the legitimate 4-star prospect that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. You don't have to worry about him being someone that drops off. If he ends up as a 3-star prospect, I would be unbelievably stunned because he's a guy that right now is ranked as the 219th overall prospect. He's ranked as the number 21 edge, and he looks the part of a guy that deserves to be ranked up there. The thing about him is that he is 6'4", 217 pounds, so he is a little bit slight, but everything is there for him. He plays, first of all, South San Antonio High School in San Antonio, Texas. Doesn't really get better than the state of Texas in terms of being able to recruit guys. We've seen a few guys that Carolina has recruited from there. South San Antonio, not the greatest team in terms of record, but they play at a pretty high level in the state of Texas. So he is the guy that is facing some of the best in that state. And he's, finished last season, 85 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and 9 quarterback hurries. Again, you look at those numbers, they are, pretty solid. I love the tackle number. I think that's fantastic, especially for a guy that's an edge rusher. Tackles for loss, sacks, those are numbers that you would always love to see be more gaudy. But, we've talked about it before, and I talked about it, I think, on the last edition of the podcast or maybe the previous one before that some of these guys' stats can be skewed. There's other schools that there are certain schools out there that put a lot of emphasis on giving guys tackles, for loss, adding those numbers up to sort of blow them out of proportion, make guys higher rated players than they are. There's other schools that look at those numbers and want to make it as realistic as possible to be able to sell their guys and say, this is exactly what you're going to get production wise. The thing that I like is that while there are 3 sacks, you do have 9 quarterback hurries. And that's a statistic that is very, very broad. And it really just depends on how they're keeping up with that. Seems like they weren't just doling out pressure. So there could have been more pressures that he would have had if you're going analytically once he gets to, if he was doing this at the college level and Pro Football Focus was there, they could credit him with more pressures. But then you turn on the film. And that's the thing that you ultimately want to do. And again, highlight film, take it for what it's worth. I'm just looking for certain traits of guys when I turn that on. And, unfortunately, no junior film on him. So not the greatest thing. That's certainly not what you want to see if you're someone that's breaking them down. But you turn on the sophomore film, and that really shows you that there is a lot to like about him. If he grew during his junior year, that's great. And could grow even more during his senior year in terms of some of the stuff that you see. But right off the bat, speed is tremendous. At his size, I think it's outstanding. It makes him very difficult to stay in front of for some of these tackles. And then, one thing that I saw is we talk about high motor guys. The thing about him is that I wrote down incredibly high motor. And what I mean by that is this is a dude that will run plays down 60 yards downfield, where most defensive ends, most edge rushers, if they're out of the play, they're out of the play. They're not going to worry about that. And it would be one thing if I saw it one time on his film. You see this over and over and over again. There are 3, 4, 5 highlights from him that just show him down the field running down plays. This dude, I think when you see that, that's something that you should immediately as a fan be attracted to. That should immediately say to you, this is somebody that I want on my team. And I think that's what you see from Braden Booth. Some of the other stuff that really sticks out, I think he's got a quick release off the line of scrimmage. And then, when you combine that with his speed, it allows him to constantly be creating pressure in the backfield. There were some pressures that probably, as I said, weren't written down. His highlight film, he's constantly creating pressure. And that's another thing. I said it's his sophomore film, 2 years of production. You like to see that. Even though I didn't put the stats down, I didn't write them down for his sophomore season, he was definitely a guy that was producing at a pretty high level in his sophomore year. So this is 2 years of him being able to produce at one of the highest levels in the state of Texas. He has a nice level of physicality, and which is something that he had to develop because they do play him inside. So I think that's certainly something that you like to see, is that there's a little bit of physicality there. That should improve once he adds a little bit of upper body strength, which is what you're ultimately going to want to do when you get him to campus as part of just bulking him up in general. And then, I think he probably also is served well by his time playing inside when it comes to run defense. I think that's probably a guy that's going to be a little bit more patient than certain other edge rushers that are pure pass rushers, that are there for one reason: get downhill, get to the quarterback. He has that ability to do that. But I think when you are a guy that plays inside, you're going to be someone that develops a little bit more of an understanding of how important it is to stop the run. You're going to understand the patience that's needed to be able to stop the run. So hopefully that's something that really carries over into his film. Like I said, add some weight to his frame, going to be very important for him when he gets to the college level. But he is one of the better speed rushers in this class. And he's someone that I think could make a significant impact when he gets to Carolina. The thing that's important is that he just has to find a way to be able to add that weight and still be as explosive as he is, at the high school level. If he can do that at the college level, then you've really got something. The problem is that we've had guys like this before. at Carolina. Malachi Hamrick, Curtis Simpson. Now, Curtis Simpson's a guy that who knows he can end up working out. He is a guy that went to Charlotte, actually ended up playing pretty well this year. Don't know if he landed anywhere. I know he was in the transfer portal earlier this offseason, but those were guys that were incredibly productive, came in a little bit thin, and there was a lot of hype around them, and they just never were able to recreate that type of explosiveness that they had at the high school level once they got to college. So can Braden Booth do that? I think you should be pretty excited if you're a Carolina fan, because if he's utilized right, and I think he could be by this staff. The one thing that I will say is that if there's anybody to trust when it comes to this staff, it is Stephen Belichick and what he did, towards the second half of last year with the guys that were on his defense that were bought in to actually playing for his defense. There were a couple of guys that I think at times might have been making business decisions. A couple of guys might even be strong. It might be one guy that was out there making business decisions, but everybody else, he really showed that he can develop them, that they can become very solid players. And that defense did take a step last year. He's a guy that I trust can develop Braden Booth once he gets to campus. All right, we move on to the third commitment from yesterday. This one in the evening. It was first reported by Inside Carolina. 2027 three-star wide receiver Anthony Williams committed to Carolina on Sunday evening. He was a guy that was not on campus this weekend. The previous two were on campus over the weekend. But this was a guy that was on campus last weekend. And he ends up committing to Carolina over Virginia Tech, Liberty. Those were two schools that he had scheduled to take official visits with heading into the month. Those got canceled. So then he was pivoting to East Carolina as the other school that he could possibly land with. But he ends up making the commitment to Carolina before he even travels to East Carolina. I'm not sure if he actually made that commitment before, but he did not make that trip to East Carolina and then ends up committing officially last night. He is currently an unranked prospect, which to me is just a complete oversight by Rivals. He is so much better than a guy than someone that should be unranked by this point. Carolina's been recruiting him for a while. Virginia Tech was recruiting him. West Virginia was recruiting him. He's got enough offers from Power 4 schools that he should have been already on the radar for Rivals. Why they haven't ranked him yet, I have no idea. But I really like what I see from him. In 2025, as a junior at Oceanside Collegiate Academy in North Charleston, South Carolina, a team that won a state title, he hauled in 61 passes for 1,061 yards and 12 touchdowns in 15 games. He is a guy that measures in at 6'1", 190 pounds, and is a player that, as I said, I believe should be getting way more love in this class than he is. This is one of those guys that I think should probably be a mid 3-star, maybe even higher. He is really that good when you turn on the film for him. And he was playing in a system that, granted, threw the ball a lot, but at the same time, he had another 1,000-yard receiver that was right alongside of him and was able to stand out and make his own name for himself. First thing that jumps off the page for him is the speed. Absolutely electric in some of the deep passing patterns that you see. Look, is he the fastest guy in the class? I don't know. I haven't watched everybody. But what you see from him consistently is that he's able to win deep. And that's something that is very welcome in just about any offense, but especially in Bobby Petrino's offense. Who knows if it would have been welcomed in Freddie Kitchens' offense. I mean, it's so old school. He maybe would have said, we don't need you. But in this offense, it feels like he's going to fit in pretty well. The speed also shows up after the catch, which allows him to create big plays consistently, even if it's a short throw. I think you really like what you see from him in that area. He's able to pull away from defenders pretty quickly. And so he can turn, a 5-yard slant route into a 15, 20-yard gain. You see that pretty consistently with some of those routes. Some of the screen plays that he, ends up catching, turns those into big plays as well. And so I really like everything that I see from him from a speed element. I think it shows up just about everywhere on the field. When it comes to what he does after the catch, he also does a good job of making defenders miss with his strong change of direction. And he does have a little bit of an edge. That's one of the things that really stands out about him too, is that, yes, he is able to pull away from guys with speed. He is able to change direction, make guys miss in the open field. But at 6'1", 190, you may look at him and say, relatively slender type of wide receiver. Is he a guy that can actually run through defenders? There's a couple of times he lowers the shoulder and runs through a couple of guys to keep plays going. Now, again, they're corners. He's not running over defensive linemen, but certainly you like to see that he's got a little bit of an edge to him, that he's someone that does, value being able to stay on his feet and create some of those big plays by being physical. He is a tremendous route runner. That's one of the things that, again, really jumped off when I was watching him on film. He's a guy that runs hard and crisp routes. And, even though he doesn't have the most complex route tree that you will see in this class, he is, somebody that is a little bit more well-versed than some of the other deep ball threats. I've seen guys that Carolina's brought in, that other schools have brought in, where their route tree is literally, can you run a go route? Can you run a post route? And look, if you're that successful doing it, it's all you need. I mean, just watch Tennessee's offense. There's guys that literally made careers off of doing that. As a Giants fan, I know it very, very true of Jalen Hyatt. But when you watch him, there's more to his game. He is throwing in some of those 10-yard dig routes. He is a guy that is, having to create separation, sometimes with, the in and out routes. There's certain things that he does have on film. And it's, he throws in a couple of slants there as well that I think, will make him pretty effective in all three levels. Would I like it to become a little more complete as he gets to the college level? Certainly. But I think that's something that they'll work on once he gets there. Biggest thing is, if you can take the top off the defense, if you're going to win downfield, they're going to throw you a lot of routes downfield. And I think that's what you see from him. He good hands catcher of the ball. I do like that. I think he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be pretty reliable. I have to watch a game to see and make sure. But I think based on what you see, when you see guys that catch the ball with their hands more than catch it with their bodies, you feel pretty good about those guys being pretty reliable. So I think that's, certainly something that you love to see. Simply put, this is a guy that I think when you look at this class, there are guys that are lower rated prospects. This is a perfect example of a guy that you cannot just look at where he is ranked and say, oh, this means that Carolina, ended up recruiting a scrub. This is certainly not somebody that we should be excited about. You need to turn on the highlight film and take a look, because when you do, there's certain things that jump off. I am in a group chat with a couple of guys that love Carolina football just as much as I do, that love Carolina recruiting just as much as I do. And one of them, before I could put it in the group, they watched the film and they said, this guy is incredibly underrated. And I jumped in there and said, I think the exact same thing. This is somebody that when he gets ranked, hopefully he is ranked the way that he is supposed to. But if he's not, then he's going to be one that when we circle back around and we do the superlatives for the class, he will probably be my most underrated player, because I get that feeling when I watch him. I think he is absolutely spectacular. I think that everything that he does on film is really, really encouraging. The production's there too. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe it is the system that he's in. Maybe when he gets to college, it'll be completely different. But I think this is someone that you should be willing to take a risk on if you're a Carolina fan. This is someone that you should be excited about if you are a Tar Heel fan. All right, now we get to the last commitment. This commitment came today and gave Carolina their 15th commitment of the class, and is the reason why the class is now ranked number 43 overall and number 11 in the ACC according to Rivals industry rankings. That would be Nazir Pitchford, the 3-star cornerback out of Palmetto High School in Palmetto, Florida. This is a guy that Carolina flipped because he was committed to Kansas after last week, or after a visit to Kansas last weekend. He ended up committing on Monday. Now this Monday, just a week later, Carolina ends up flipping him. He was in Chapel Hill over the weekend. He is rated as the number 892 overall prospect, the number 92 corner in the 2027 class, guy that played both sides of the ball last year. Max Preps lists him as a guy that only had 6 total tackles and 1 pass breakup a year ago. If you watch the film, that is not at all what his stats should probably be. Now, I don't know how many tackles he had, but in terms of pass breakups, he had more than 1. I mean, I counted 5 or 6 on one hand. So, or not on one hand, that would be unbelievable. On both hands, potentially. He is somebody that I think, again, when you throw on the film, you'll see is probably a little underrated. I think it's at 6'1", 170 pounds. There could be a lot of stock going into the fact that he's only 170 pounds. That is a little thin, but that's certainly something that, again, you can sort of build on as you get to college. Got plenty of size at 6'1" to stick on the outside. And I think at this point, Carolina should have an appetite to keep him on the outside. Because they need outside corners. I know that Caleb Cost is going to be a guy that's going to be going in the future as well, in the near future. I think he's a junior coming into this year, if I'm remembering correctly. But still, that's somebody that you're having to prepare for, leaving in the next couple of years. And so this will be a guy that you could recruit to help replace him. This is probably a guy that's going to be on the outside. You look at him, 6'1", and I love the way that he plays the 50-50 balls. There were, a couple right at the start of his film that just really jumped out to me, where he's able to high point the football in coverage and does a great job of knocking it down. That's something that you love to see. Doesn't come away with the interception, but knows how to play the football. He looks really good opening up and running with receivers down the field. And, it's a lot of that is due to the speed that he possesses. And I think he has pretty smooth hips, especially for a guy at the college level. He has some nice quickness and burst, which allow him to make plays on the ball in zone coverage. Again, that's very limited film. So who knows? This could be a guy that when I actually watch a game, you never know. This could be somebody that I go back and I look at and say, maybe that this isn't necessarily as strong as I once thought. But just from seeing it on his highlight film, I like what I see there. He isn't nearly as involved in the run defense as some of the team's recent commits at corner, going back, the last couple of years. But he is smart, situational in terms of what he does as a tackler. And I think the one thing that you like to see, he highlighted this a couple of times on his film. I think it was 2 or 3 times. It's either a 3rd down stop or it's a 4th down stop. And he does a good job of knowing in those cases, I need to tackle high. I need to prevent this guy from getting to the 1st down line. That's where I think he's really smart in that thinking. I think that's an area that, when you look at certain guys, there are guys that think, hey, just get the guy on the ground. I'm going to go for the legs. They end up stretching out and getting a 1st down. He's a guy that knows, hey, in that scenario, even though it is a little more risky, I need to play the sticks, play the ball carrier high, and try to wrestle him down from that angle. I think that's what you see from him that's really smart. I said I think it's a nice upside pickup. I really think that this is somebody that can develop into a good player. Is it guaranteed that he's going to be a guy that ends up contributing for Carolina? No. But I think this is a very, very healthy bite at the apple for Carolina that could end up turning into something. Don't think he's going to come on campus and immediately be that guy. I don't get that sense from him. I don't think, you see, some of the areas, I think he's going to have to probably be a little bit more involved in the run game. You're hoping that he is maybe able to take the ball away a little bit more at the college level. But I do think that somewhere along the line, this could be someone that we're talking about that develops into a pretty good player. This could be someone that develops into what we've seen Jaden Patterson develop into. It really just depends on how he's developed by this staff. And so I really like these four guys that Carolina ended up picking up. I think all of these guys, you can see that there are things to really like about these guys. Not that the other guys in the class didn't have that, but there were some other guys that I looked at and I said, man, I got to dig deep to try to find certain elements of these guys that I really think are going to work out well for Carolina. Where with these guys, it was pretty natural. And, look, I'm looking at the class right now. I said this is a class that's, currently ranked at number 43 overall. Well, that's moved up. Now Carolina's ranked 41st overall. They are ranked 10th in the ACC. And the reason why, at least from what I can see here, is that one player that they have committed in this class has taken a little bit of a jump here recently, and that would be Neil Roberts, the interior offensive lineman out of Winona High School in Winona, Mississippi. If you guys didn't listen to the last edition of the podcast, I broke him down. It's another guy that I thought was better than what I saw, or was better than what I saw rankings-wise. It's same thing with Noah Spinks. That's another quarterback. That's a quarterback that I think a lot of people were like, why should we be excited about this guy? Turn on the film, judge for yourself. And if you still don't feel great about the guy, then, hey, that's fine. There's other guys that I think you will feel pretty good about. But I think now you look at it and you've got two blue chip prospects in here. You got two guys that I think could have early effects at Carolina. There's some other guys that you just never really know with Zyke Scott, Aaron Williams at linebacker. And it's starting to feel like Carolina's filling some of those needs. Yes, there's other areas where you're going to have to eventually land some guys. I think safety is one of those positions that I'm really focused on right now. Hey, can we find a commitment? Doesn't look like it's going to be Marcus Jones. Looks like that's going to end up going the way of Tennessee. But maybe Carolina can find somebody, maybe Kennedy Green, the guy who visited in the middle of this past week. Maybe he's a guy that ends up, coming to Carolina, even though Carolina jumped in late on him. Maybe there's another guy that we haven't even talked about yet. Maybe there's somebody that, has been on Carolina's radar that they're working on and that they could flip once we get in season. That could even be something that we eventually see. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But I do think that, and I was someone who was kind of with you guys a little bit early on in this class, being a little bit critical on with some of the guys that Carolina was missing on. Don't love the fact that Carolina is not really relying on the in-state prospects. They, to this point, don't have a single guy from the state of North Carolina. Closest they get is Anthony Williams. But I do think that they are starting to land some big names. They are starting to get me a little bit excited with some of the guys that they are bringing in here. And that's something that we'll be keeping you up to date on here over the next handful of weeks. Got one more official visit weekend coming up, guys. By the way, we could be on here tomorrow night, Wednesday night, any of these nights. Well, probably not Wednesday night. We're going to give the Diamond Heels their credit and allow them to be on your screens as opposed to us whenever they are. But we'll be jumping on here hopefully sometime soon with even more commitments because you just never know. Carolina hosted, I think it was 9 or 10 guys this past weekend that we can, at least confirm as of this point. There is, a guy that is going to decide later on this week. I don't know. I don't think it's going to work out in Carolina's favor in Amari Patterson, the 4-star wide receiver out of Bluffton High School down there in South Carolina. Maybe that does end up working out because he has the connection to Carnell Warren. Look, the Braden Booth one was a complete shock to me. So maybe there's another one that jumps out. Regardless of what happens, we're going to be here for you. HeelToughBlog.com. Just, give us a little bit of grace. We are working. I was on vacation during a lot of these commitments. And so some of the articles have been delayed, but they're great articles. Make sure you go back and check them out. We'd greatly appreciate it. You just went back and read our scouting reports on these guys, learn a little bit more about the stats, learn a little bit more about these guys just in general, and get closer to these Tar Heel prospects because I think they're, great kids that Carolina's picking up and they're worthy of being supported. So make sure you go and read those articles on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Of course, any news that comes out around the program, we are going to have you guys covered. If there's any sort of on-field news, we're going to be there for you guys. And then coming up soon, the position previews. We're going to start rolling those out once we are done with this official visit weekend, unless there is just a rash of commitments that ends up coming up after that. But we will be there for you guys and getting you ready for this upcoming season, one that I think as we're getting closer to it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get those tingles a little bit. I'm starting to feel like I need football back. I'm starting to see an avenue where maybe this team can get to 6 wins. The positivity is starting to be there just a slight bit, and we will continue to get you guys ready for this upcoming season. Any news that comes out once we get into fall camp, we will, of course, have all of that. So make sure you keep up with that on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. The other thing that we want you guys to do when you go over there is check out the basketball content that we got going for you guys. We told you about the guy that Carolina was interested in, Wee Lin out of Oregon. Nothing new has come out on that front, but if there is anything that comes out on his front or anybody else that Carolina could look to add to the roster with that one last scholarship spot, there could be 2 available. If Carolina really wants it, we'll have to end up seeing what they do. But regardless, we will have you covered over there on HeelToughBlog.com. And we do have an article up there. Carolina's preseason exhibition has been set. Find out which Big Ten team Carolina is playing to get prepared for the upcoming season on October 18th. Go to the website right now and check that out for us. When it comes to the podcast, guys, anywhere that you're watching tonight, make sure that you come back and watch anytime there's an edition of the podcast, whether it's on Twitter at HeelToughBlog, on Facebook at HeelToughBlog, or the one that we're really trying to hammer home for you guys, that YouTube page. Please, if you are watching this podcast, and I know there are still some people that are hanging on with us, we greatly appreciate you. Go over to our YouTube page and give us a subscription. You don't know how much that helps us. We're trying to find sponsors. We're trying to get our channel monetized. And in order to do that, we need you guys to subscribe to our channel. So if you love what you see here, frankly, if you hate what you see here, if you can't stand the look of my face, you think I'm the ugliest human, I'm the biggest piece of bleep that you've ever seen in your entire life, doesn't matter. Go over there, give us a subscription. It would greatly help us, and we would really appreciate it. So, that's the main thing that we're pushing right now. Even if you don't watch over there, it just help us out, guys. We'd really appreciate it. So, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.